An enclosed emitter means the entire laser is sealed away from the elements with the front and rear glass panels. This is unlike the holosun 507C that has its laser emitter exposed to the elements and could be filled with dirt and gunk and stuff. So the 509T would, in theory, operate much better in more harsh environments, but I think the number of people that think they need this is like way overblown. I hear things like, well, what would I do if I got mud in my optic? I definitely need an enclosed emitter. And, maybe you do need it, but then I question your ability to hold a firearm without throwing it down into the mud. But I digress. The 509T removes the worry of fog or debris occluding the optic, but rain or water droplets could still mess with your vision through the optic a bit. Here, the 509T keeps all the dirt and debris out of the optic itself, allowing the optic to be functional even when dropped or covered in mud and sand. But I also think the need for this is wildly overblown. Like, a lot of you out there don't need an enclosed emitter to keep the dust out of it while it's sitting in your safe. All right.
I'm a fan of enclosed emitter, which means there's a lens in the back and the front. I like the closed emitter because the trouble with an open emitter is you can get crap in there. And people say, well, it's not really a problem. It's not a problem until it happens to you. Stuff on the lens can be an issue. Stuff that gets in on the emitter is a disaster. And you got to be concerned about things like dust and snow and ice. And also remember, going from cold temperatures into warm or warm temperatures into cold, you're going to get foggy. It doesn't matter which one it is. You're not going to be able to see anything for that until that dissipates. And there's things you can use. There's a lens treatment called cat crap that a lot of guys use, which does minimize that fogging to a degree. But you're still going to have it very instantaneous for a few seconds until you can see through it. Can I see through it? Is it full of belly button lint or dust? You ride a four-wheeler. This time of year where I live, everything gets coated in dust. And you say, well, that's no big deal. On a closed emitter, I can take my thumb and wipe it off if I need it. On an open emitter, you get the dust down in there. It's not going to be something you're going to fix real quick unless you carry Q-tips in your pocket. Guys say, well, you can get a holster with a hood that protects them. Yes, you can. And that's what the cops have. As a matter of fact, the dot-sighted pistols with the lights the cops are carrying, they don't have holsters. They got buckets that are disguised as holsters. If you look at them, it's like wearing a bucket on your hip. It's kind of, again, if you're a cool kid, you got it.
What they have right here is an exposed emitter. What I mean by that is where the light actually comes out is right here. It's not inside the glass, like inside an aimpoint or like inside this SIG Romeo 8. The emitter, the projector of the light, is actually between these panes of glass. Even on an EOTech, as narrow as that is, that light is prismed up inside. It is not exposed to the elements at all. Here's why that's important. If you're just a competition shooter, all right, no big deal, no big deal. However, remember, I'm talking combat shooting now. Combat shooting, I go to present this gun up. You can get one little water droplet come down and hit that emitter. Now, if you get water on your lens, your front lens, you can wipe it off. If you get water on your back lens, you can reach in there and you can wipe it off. But if you get a water droplet come down and land on that emitter, you can't wipe it out. Your fingertip cannot get in there. Now you're in the middle of a gunfight saying, excuse me, Mr. Bad Guy, will you hold on for a second? I gotta dig a Q-tip out of my cleaning kit, or I gotta use the corner of my t-shirt to get in there. All right, now, yes, there are guys that will say, well, you can shake the optic and shake that water droplet out of there. Okay, I want to see guys add that to their time on the Pro Timer. I want to see guys ask the bad guy, hold on for a second while I try to get the water off of my emitter. Now, you get into mud, it's even worse. Right? Yeah, you can wipe mud off your glass, you can. You get mud in there. Now, why would you get mud in there? Combat operations, right? Rolling around in the mud, tripping, getting off the helicopter, the rotor dust, kicking up all that dust. You look like a sugar cookie by the time that helicopter flies off. all that dust landing in that little slot right there. Remember, your pistol is sitting like this, and as soon as you go to present, all that crap's going to fly right back to that emitter and land right there. Now, so in case you hadn't figured this out yet, I'm not real big on exposed emitters. You get snow in there, anything, you're not going to get it out, guys. You're just not going to be able to clear it out, right? So that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Here's where I saw that. Remember, I'm old, so if you go back to some of our original red dots on our pistols, our old Seymours, things like that, the old original reflex sights, they had exposed emitters. We got away from them and we went to enclosed emitters because guys were, no joke, having problems with getting rain, getting mud, getting dust. It's a legitimate gripe. It really is a legitimate gripe. All right, so just like we did with rifles, we went to an enclosed emitter. There's a couple of companies out there that have enclosed emitters on pistols now. First, the standard. Everybody loves aimpoint, right? This is called the aimpoint ACRO, also known as the mailbox. It's big, it's ugly, I got that, but it is an enclosed emitter. It's got glass in the back. There's no way snow's getting on this thing. There's just not. Now, holosun also has an option, slightly smaller, actually quite a bit smaller.
As you can see though, it is a smaller optic, very much smaller, almost a ½ inch smaller to a ¼ inch smaller right in there. Weight is negligible in my mind, but the overall profile is a lot shorter than the acro. It's
enclosed. The emitter is not exposed. You can dunk this in water. You can have rain on it. You can have snow, mud, whatever. It's not going to get on the emitter. Now, I want to caution people about just buying the ones that have lids over the top of them. SIG has one, for example, that I was excited about because it looked like this. It was enclosed until I realized it was nothing more than a exposed emitter that had a cap over the top of it. That is fine for EDC. That is fine for things like that. It's not fine for the military. Think of SEALs locking out of submarines or stuff like that. Pressured water is going to get up inside that thing. Now he comes up out of the swimming pool, for example, that water is just not going to drain. So try to stay, if you're going to invest the money on a enclosed emitter, get one that's sealed, not unsealed. Right? Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. Now,
so big picture, what is it? Honestly, it's kind of all the things I had wanted. So a while ago, I ended up reviewing one of the holosuns made for primary arms with their ACSS reticle. And I love the reticle. I think it's amazing whether you're new to shooting a dot on a pistol, definitely lends itself, or even if you're experienced, just because of shooting unconventional positions, things along those lines. Really, really beneficial the way that reticle works, which we'll talk about some in a minute. The one thing I did not care for was it wasn't enclosed. So honestly, I'm not sure why anyone is making pistol optics, or any optics for that matter, that aren't enclosed at this point. I don't know why. Personally, I think they should all be enclosed, because at the very least, even if you're carrying concealed every day, you get dust and stuff in there, or if you end up doing things out of doors like I do often in inclement weather, then yeah, you have a huge chance of getting all kinds of different debris down in there, blocking your emitter, whether it's water, snow, mud, whatever it may be. And yeah, kind of a showstopper. So by having an enclosed optic, we largely alleviate that stuff. You might have to wipe that lens if you have snow, mud, anything like that on it, but you can do that rather than try and dig in there and actually clean out an emitter. So this basically marries kind of those two things I was looking for. Enclosed emitter and that ACSS Vulcan Reticle.
So this optic is probably one of the top optics I would choose for a duty-driven gun or a concealed carry gun because of the benefits being the closed emitter. You have 20,000 hours of battery life, a backup solar panel, side panel here for your battery so you don't have to remove the optic to actually change your battery. This thing has a lot of benefits. The reticle in it is really cool, having that chevron with the large circle around it. So if you lose that dot, you're able to get it back onto target much quicker and easier. Really easy to press the buttons, and durability wise, this thing is wildly durable. I went out to a class with Achilles Tactics, and it was definitely one of the harshest conditions I've ever put a gun through, and this handled it very well. It's because it is a closed emitter, so you don't have that issue of having anything else introduced to the emitter or anything to this optic like fogging to the lens that you have to worry about. This has an anti-fog to it, so you don't have any issues with the fogging. I've not experienced any problems with fogging, which is one problem with some handgun optics, is you have that issue of having it on your body, whether you're going from AC or you're warm in your body and then you go outside and it's cold and you get that fog. I've not had any issues with this one so far with that.
Why are enclosed emitters desired? Well, because they keep everything else that shouldn't be over your emitter, i.e. debris, lint, moisture, water, outside, away from the emitter. They're enclosed, so nothing's going to cover that up or prohibit that dot from being projected onto the glass. So enclosed emitters, in a sense, are a little bit more reliable. More than anything, when it comes to open emitters and blockages, I would say lint from your body, from your clothing, is the culprit 90% of the time. Not so much moisture or debris. That can be an issue, but more than anything, just good old-fashioned lint from carrying your gun around all the time and never taking it out of the holster. So, lint.
This is the holosun / primary arms. It's a partnership between the two of them. 509 with ACSS Vulcan Reticle in there. So the reticle, in my opinion, is one of the most important things about this optic. The other thing that's very important about it, in my opinion, again, is that it is a fully enclosed emitter, meaning that no dirt, debris, water, etc. can get in there. And then, of course, it is nitrogen purged, so that way it won't fog up on you.
Let's talk about this red dot, the holosun HE509 primary arms ACSS Vulcan. There are quite a lot of benefits to having a closed emitter optic. I'm not convinced that those benefits are compelling enough to get anybody to switch away from their existing open emitter optics unless you have a very specific need for one. The theory, of course, is that an open emitter optic could fill up with rain or snow or mud, or if you carry it, could fill up with lint or get sweat in it. A closed emitter optic can still get junk on the front or rear window, but a quick wipe with your t-shirt and you're back in the fight. Does it matter on a concealed carry gun? Almost definitely not. Does it matter on an open carry gun? Well, maybe. It kind of depends. All right, emitter check. Not terrible. If you're a police officer and your handgun is your primary weapon and it sits out there in your holster exposed to the elements all the time, a closed emitter optic is probably a good idea. Convince your department or agency to buy you a bunch of acro P2s. Luckily for you, the government seems to be able to get their hands on them even though nobody else can. For everybody else, the utility of a handgun as a secondary is so slim that I'm not really sure it even matters. As far as holster compatibility goes, I use this exact pistol with either a TLR7 or a TLR1, and it goes right into my Safariland holster, which is the red dot version. The 509 ACSS fits right in, and the little cover hood closes over the top of it, no problem. That hood already does a pretty good job of keeping crap out of an open emitter optic, so how concerned am I really about it? Not very. Plus, I don't put a lot of importance on the handgun as a secondary weapon in the first place. So if you're setting up a gun from scratch to use for duty or backup purposes, or it's going to be your carry gun, but you also want to be able to stick it on a battle belt or something, there's very little reason not to get a closed emitter optic, but if you've already got a gun set up with an open emitter optic, I don't think there's a lot of compelling reasons to change just yet. Final verdict on the holosun HE509 ACSS primary arms Vulcan, I'll give it a soft recommend. I think the chevron is actually the most compelling feature of this optic. I never thought I would hear myself say that, but here we are. This red dot is a primary arms special version of the holosun HE509T with a couple of significant differences. One of them is that this optic is no longer a T model, it's actually made out of aluminum, not titanium, like the original HE509. The much bigger difference, obviously, is in the reticle. This one uses the Primary Arms ACSS Vulcan Reticle, which consists of a large center chevron. Because it's a Primary Arms optic, it's got to have a chevron in there somewhere, surrounded by a massive ring. This reticle has nothing in common with the circle dot reticle you see on the holosun 507 and the 509T. The outer circle is so large that it isn't actually visible in the window of the optic when the reticle is lined up. That assumes that you have it mounted on a pistol and you're holding it at arm's length. The idea is that the outer circle aids in acquiring a sight picture when you present the handgun. If you can see part of the circle appearing in the optic window, you know that you're not lined up and it's very easy to adjust. Something about a circle just makes immediate automatic sense to your brain. It really doesn't require any special practice to use. The chevron is also really good here. It's probably the only time I'm going to say something nice about the chevron reticle on any Primary Arms optic. It kind of pulls double duty. If you're shooting quickly, you can use the entire chevron as if it's a flash sight picture. Basically, it's like having a 10 MOA dot. When you need to slow down and go more precise, you use the tip of the chevron, and then it's like having a effectively 1 MOA dot. You zero your point of impact to the tip of the chevron, and in theory you can use the base of the chevron as some kind of ranging feature. I don't think that's very useful because of how much of the target the chevron occludes. What it is good for is essentially giving you the best of both worlds when it comes to dot size. Like if you couldn't choose between the 3 different dot sizes on the Trijicon RMR, the 1 MOA, 3.25 MOA, or 6 MOA. The ACSS chevron essentially gives you all the speed of the biggest dot size and all the precision of the smallest dot size. To an extent, obviously. The tip of the chevron is infinitely precise, but it's also infinitely vague, so it's kind of 1 MOA and it's kind of infinity MOA. As far as handguns go, that doesn't matter. The tip of the chevron gives you precision for slow fire, and the entire chevron is useful for a rapid flash sight picture. Cover the bad guy with the whole triangle and pull the trigger till the problem goes away. The 509 ACSS reticle is extremely fun to use under night vision. Using a night vision device effectively moves your eyeball 6 inches farther forward from your face, and that's far enough forward that you actually can see the entire Vulcan reticle, even when you're shooting with a handgun at full extension. In my experience, it's already pretty easy to acquire a sight picture with a red dot equipped handgun under night vision. The 509 ACSS reticle makes that even easier.
Let's go ahead and talk to the reticle first. So when you look in here, there's a chevron in the middle, I believe 10 MOA chevron. And personally, I like that more than a dot. Having astigmatism, oftentimes dots just kind of turn into a little burst. Chevron, usually pretty clean. And having that chevron, you can actually zero the tip of the chevron, which is a more refined aiming point for me. But the big part with that ACSS Vulcan is there's a massive ring, which when you present out and that chevron's right there centered up, you actually don't see it. But if you're off at all, right now, I see this part of that ring. So if I move it to get rid of that part of the ring, immediately the chevron presents itself. So regardless of where you are, what position, you throw this up and you see any part of the ring, it's immediately giving you like feedback for your brain and your eye that's really easy to work with. It's essentially like scope shadow, except you're not up here on this thing. And what it allows is basically that immediate visual feedback so that you can immediately get center and have your reticle there in the center of this optic, which is huge, especially for new shooters. You ever hand someone like a gun with an RMR, there's this, and you're like, look for your front sight. Still this, look for your, oh, there it is, okay, cool. This, you're like, hey, like, and super intuitive, like, oh, cool, there it is. Really handy. And as I mentioned, aside from new shooters, just shooting some weird unconventional position under something definitely lends itself to that as well.
I mentioned the one big con everybody has is I can't find my dot. I can't find my dot, Carol, I can't find my dot. All my other red dot shooters out there will say, that's bullshit. Once you've changed your muscle memory, you're good to go. You're good to go. And you are, all right? You are good to go, all right? You are perfectly fine on a flat range. What you will find is when you're shooting odd shooting positions, for example, around barricades, through small firing ports, under vehicles, things like that, you're not going to be square presenting that firearm, and you will have a hard time finding that dot. That's why I'm excited about, and you'll notice I run it on my pistol. Chad has it on his pistol. What this is and it's the optic itself is made by Holosun, but when you look at it, it'll say Holosun with ACSS reticle. These have the ACSS Vulcan reticle in it. Now, what it is basically it has the chevron for long distance shooting, but it also has a circle. Now, not a small circle with a dot like an EOTech. It's not the donut of death, all right? It is the small chevron. That's all you see in your field of view when you're at full presentation. You don't see the circle at all. However, if as you present the firearm, it's canted left, right, up, or down, you'll see the edge of that circle. The circle is just outside your field of view. And when the pistol's wrong, you'll see the edge of that circle. Wherever the edge of the circle is, that's the direction you move the front of your gun. If it's over here, you move it that way. If you see in the bottom, you drop the front of the gun. If you see the top, you raise the front of the gun. And what you'll see is as you raise that circle, that chevron will come right up into your field of view. All right, so if you're a new shooter, you haven't bought that red dot optic yet, it's called the ACSS Vulcan Reticle. Right now it's only available with Holosun. I pray that Aimpoint puts it inside the ACRO. I love the ACRO. It's an enclosed, I love it. I pray that Trijicon puts it in their RMR. I pray they put it in their SRO. This is a great optic for competition, but shooting around barricades, things like that, you still do lose the dot. So, and with that reticle is not restricted just to Holosun. Some companies also have what's called a chevron. It'll be a basically an upside down V, a chevron. All right, now, the advantage of the chevron, I've heard a lot of people say they don't like it. Here's the deal. Height over bore, right? Remember, close in, I need to aim a little bit high, height over bore. Now, I understand height over bore is not very high on a pistol, but it's still, you still have height over bore, you do. So, close in, you're aiming with the whole chevron, the middle of the chevron. And that's going to actually put the tip of that chevron a little high on your target and works height over bore. But the true advantage of the chevron is when you're shooting those long distance targets, 50 meters, 100 meters, 130 meters. Yes, with my Holosun with the chevron in it, I can hit steel at 130. Right? Now, my range only goes out to 130. Top very tip gives you a very small definitive aiming point. So
if I'm doing a cross-side dominant thing where I got to do a half, bring over as far as the gun goes, and then a half head turn to kind of meet in the middle, I don't have those alignment issues because if I screw up just a little bit, I'm not fishing anymore. That's the big thing, is that the reticle kind of denies any real fishing whatsoever because you can see where you're misaligned and instantly correct it the second that you are. Now, this really helps not just with the cross-side dominant dudes, but if you're in really goofy positions, like if you're working a 9-hole wall or you're messing around with cars and that kind of thing, it's pretty easy to make sure that you stay lined up and the whole this deal just isn't a thing anymore. It's just a minor correction into where you need to be. In the time that I've used dots intensively, and it's been a little more than a few years now, that I've been doing that, this is probably the only optic reticle setup that I've used where I haven't fished for a reticle once. Anytime that I was even moderately misaligned, especially with the nature of that huge ring, it's really easy to get back into wherever it is that you need to be, whether you got to correct up, down, left, right, a combination of those, whatever. It's pretty easy to do. So, cool, that works, right? There is a benefit to the chevron itself, is that it is a larger reticle. So if I'm trying to move faster, I absolutely can. And the size of the optic not prohibiting how smooth the gun is running, it really does help with that as well. So it doesn't really matter if I'm trying to shoot further away, because I can get it done. I wish it was a dot, but I can get it done if I'm trying to shoot further away, if I'm trying to handle stuff up close, especially if I'm just trying to really crank it out of that holster like as fast as possible. I can take the very tiny amount of time to make the adjustments that I can already see I need to make versus trying to make the fish that everyone has had to do if they've shot with dots on their pistols for any real length of time. So, you know, just getting the gun out there and making sure that everything is lined up where it needs to be is really easy to do in this package, especially because closed emitter dots are starting to evolve. There's a bunch of options that are available now. I really like this package a lot because it's closed emitter, tray type battery, easy to pick up as far as your eyeballs are concerned. And I know I've said that a few times, but I cannot stress that enough. It's really easy to pick up and make corrections because that's a big thing. And that's a real deciding factor, is that if you screw up, and you will screw up, how fast you recover from that screw up is gonna make or break people.
So you have that chevron in the middle, and you can actually use that for ranging. So you can shoot at different distances by using the chevron depending on what caliber you have, which I'll have some B-roll here showing you exactly the way it works. But the giant circle around the actual chevron, I've heard a lot of people say it's too cluttered. Why would you want all that stuff in your optic? What I will say, when you actually have this sighted in properly, or when you're looking down this properly, you don't see the large circle. It's far enough out that you don't see it. Now, showing it on camera, obviously when you're a little bit closer, depending on how you look at it, like if I look at it from this distance, obviously I can see the chevron because I'm closer to the optic. But when you have it at a distance where you're actually shooting, and you're shooting correctly where that chevron is where it's supposed to be, you're not gonna see that outer circle. So when people tell me it's too cluttered, you don't necessarily see all that stuff. All you're seeing is the chevron. Once you shoot and the chevron is no longer in the sight picture, you then can see the large circle around it. But the use for that is now you can bring that chevron back on a target where you want it. So it has a purpose. It does not overclutter things like a lot of people think. I think that rumor was started from people that have never actually used the device, just see it on the internet and see that picture, and they're like, okay, that must all be in there, like a EOTech or like some of the holosuns have that circle dot that's all right there. But that is not true. As long as you are sighting properly and you have that chevron where it's supposed to be, and you are extended and not shooting your handgun like this, like you shouldn't be, you will never actually see that outer circle.
So with that, the chevron can be used as a BDC type of reticle, and you guys can see all the different calibers that it's compatible with and where you need to zero it and all those sorts of things here on your screen. But that outer ring is the most important part of the reticle, in my opinion. Of course, having the infinitely small aiming chevron is nice. You don't have to worry about dot size, but that outer circle, if you are off when you present the firearm, that you will just see the edge of it here. I should be rolling in some screenshots that you guys can see, and your brain, without thinking, just instinctively automatically corrects it and puts you back where you need to be. And when I say automatically, trust me, you don't think about it. I've handed this system primarily on the 509 that we've used in the past to, I don't know, at least 15 people, many of whom are not, you know, experienced shooters at all, never mind experience with a red dot, people who would typically 90% of the time miss the dot, and none of them had any issue finding it because that circle just tells your brain where you need to move it to see that chevron. Additionally, before we start beating on it, I should note that the glass is very clear. If you're somebody who doesn't like a blue tint, you're just not going to see it with this optic. So if that is you, we're good to go. Now we're going to just do some one-handed slide racks here off of our wood just to kind of test it, see how it is. Keep in mind we're using the MOS system, which is not the strongest, but I think it'll be okay. We shall see. And everything looks just fine on there with the exception of my fingerprint. Took a chunk of wood out that time and it still seems to be zeroed. Now I'm going to put a round on target. Hopefully it's at 35 yards. So see if we can hit it. And we hit it just fine. Let's see how it holds up to some drop tests. Now we're going to drop this thing and see how it does. During my last drop test, I initially dropped it on steel and people got mad. I don't know why. So they said they wanted to see something softer before that. So we'll drop it on sand. We have 15 rounds here in the mag, Stream White TLR on there rather. I'm 6 feet tall. I'll be dropping it from my standard shoulder height and just onto some dirt. I doubt that did anything. It sure didn't. Everything looks good to go. Knock a little bit of that dirt off, but the glass is good, everything's good. And I haven't mentioned before, but it does have the solar backup on there as well up on top, so that way really it will give you even more battery life than what they're quoting. Now we're going to drop it here onto our shootsteel.com plate. This is about worst case scenario possible, a direct hit, loaded, and straight onto it from this high up. Who drops their gun like this? Anyway, it's all about science. All right, everything looks good. Hopefully you guys will be able to see this. We definitely had that dent right there and that nick in the aluminum, but the glass is perfect. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And anybody who's watched this channel before knows that kills most optics. The vast majority of open emitter optics will die right there, with the exception of the RMR in my testing. Drop it again. All right, that was a really solid hit. Hopefully you guys saw that there in the camera. And so we had our initial hit there. And now we have our second hit. And the glass is perfect. I'm gonna drop it one more time. But again, this is done better than really everything, with the exception of the RMR that I've tested here on the channel in terms of durability. Another nasty hit. Nasty, nasty. That one there extended our scuff line there all the way across. Hopefully you guys can see that with the camera settings. Now we'll just check zero real quick. Obviously I moved a little bit closer to that target. And at this point it's probably, what, 20 yards away? Let's see. Zero, still good. While the range is still hot, I sort of want to walk you through what you see here when you're actually the user with the gun. So obviously I'm completely ignoring my backup sights to use with the optic. And at this, say I was up here, right? At this point, I see the entire circle. I can see the circle all the way edge to edge with the chevron. But as soon as I press out, and now my chevron is right on the target, center of that chest, and I absolutely see no circle. Now I brought the chevron off about 12 inches, maybe 6 inches rather, to the right, and I can see both the chevron and the circle on the left side here. And again, the reason most people miss the dot is because they miss it high and don't grip really enough with their pinky. So if I'm high, I see the bottom of the circle and the chevron now. As I bring it down, basically right when I'm at the head, at this distance, I can barely see the bottom of the chevron. If I put it right in the center of the chest of the target, again, it's gone. And at this point, we can engage. Another thing it helps with is during recoil, as you're tracking that slide, sometimes the dot gets lost there. Again, it helps you bring it right back down to a nice, consistent point where you can continuously get hits.
Always controversial, of course, is the drop testing. People say, I'm not going to drop my gun. Yeah, well, the drop test is not necessarily designed to replicate the dropping of a firearm, and I think I say this in every video, but to replicate stress on the firearm from taking a tumble. For law enforcement, if it's in your holster and you're rolling around with a suspect on the ground, optics on duty have been broken that way. So if an optic can survive a drop test, it's probably going to survive whatever the job can throw at you. 10,000 rounds. You'll know the drop test is probably one of the most extreme things I do. After the initial 2,000 round review process, I maintain my standard testing procedure, which is extreme heat, extreme cold, a drop test from shoulder height on a hard surface every 500 rounds, and single hand manipulations, because that's something that we do. If I need to shoot one-handed and I have a malfunction, or if I need to manipulate the slide for any reason and my other hand's not available, I can manipulate off of an object. That's something the optic needs to be able to handle, especially in law enforcement, because one-handed and sport hand only, primary hand only shooting is something that's taught repetitively in law enforcement because it's come up in the past. And then, of course, the drop testing. A drop every 500 rounds. That's a lot of drops for 10,000 rounds, and the 509 has survived every single one of them. So over 10,000 rounds, 20 drops on a hard surface, and the 509 is still ticking, although it did have a little bit of delamination and chipping on the rear lens, and of course I've got a little bit of crack on the solar panel and some overall marring on the aesthetic finish of the optic, but other than that, it remains functional, it remains usable, it remains accurate. The first 5-round group I ever fired on this gun for record, you saw from the original video. Show you that right now. Here's my 5-round group, very first 5-round group I ever did for record. And here is another 5-round group fired after the last drop test at the 10,000 round count. So, 0 maintained. I think we can agree that that 0 has been maintained.
As far as that battery goes, one thing that's really nice is you don't have to remove the optic to replace the battery. Unlike a Trijicon RMR, in which case now you need to go re-zero it. Not a ton of fun. Battery life from that CR1632, I believe it is, about 20,000 hours, but you also have the solar cell, so you're pulling light.
The 509T also mimics the 507C and uses the same CR1632 side-loading battery tray. I do wish the little screw to hold this in had some sort of self-retaining clip though. And it's really awesome to see that feature carried over, because then you don't have to remove, re-Loctite, reinstall, re-zero, and do all that nonsense just because your battery died. That process can really be super annoying, and if it happens at the range, yeah, you can go and pack up, your day's over. With the smart battery design, you no longer have to deal with the dumb of removing an entire optic just to change the battery.
And on top, of course, you have that solar pad right there. That's going to also increase that battery life. So when you have it on the auto adjust, it is drawing energy from the sun. Your battery isn't working all the time. Again, that's going to add to that longevity in that battery. The battery is a CR1632. It's a side loader. That's really nice. Don't have to remove it from the gun. Just pop a screw on the side, put in your new battery, pop it back in. Good to go. No need to re-zero. You're not moving the optic from the slide or mount, wherever it's at. In addition to all these great features I just listed, the field of view on the 509T is awesome. Nice big window, bigger than an RMR. Take in a lot of information through that window. All right, let's take a look at some of the specs side by side right now. Let's look at it. Oh boy, oh my. Now on paper, it would appear that the 509T just absolutely dominates the aimpoint acro in every way, and it's true. It's true. Particularly true if we are talking about the value of your dollar to performance here. There's the performance difference in specs is staggering. That being said, the aimpoint acro is not a bad red dot at all. It really isn't. It's actually a very good red dot. What I'm getting at here is the value is pretty apparent between the two. The 509T is just smaller, better battery life, better price, more features. It just crushes the acro. It's a pretty easy decision. I'm sure some of you might disagree with that, but not many. I wouldn't be surprised if Aimpoint in the next couple of years comes out with a version 2 of the acro, and I'm guessing it's going to be smaller. It'll use a different battery, and it could be a very good competitor to the 509T. But as of right now, I don't think it is. It doesn't give it really a run for its money. That being said, the acro isn't a bad red dot. It is a great red dot. Aimpoint makes great products. This is a great product. It's just when we're talking value, and a lot of you out there, the majority of you out there care about value.
I think closed emitters is the future. I don't see a lot of people within 5 years really going to be going open emitter. I think that's going to be like a competition thing, or maybe like a range toy thing. But when you're looking for concealed carry or duty-driven optic, I think pretty much everybody's going to be switching to this closed emitter. And we're going to look back in 5 years from now and be like, we actually carried open emitted optics. Like, why didn't we just do closed emitters? It just makes more sense. You don't have all that introduction of possible problems and things to go wrong. It makes more sense.
I assume in the future that red dots on pistols is going to be just like red dots on rifles. And in my opinion, products like this are how we're going to get there.
Mark my words, within the next few years, you're going to see that every combat pistol out there, starting with the military, then law enforcement, then all of you, they're all going to have red dot optics on them. Guys, literally, it is the way of the future. Now, when you get it, get an enclosed emitter, whether it's the holosun that's enclosed, whether it's the ACRO, but get that enclosed emitter, but get it with the Vulcan reticle or a similar reticle like that. Get something that's going to serve you for decades to come and change those batteries.
Now, the final point I want to make, people say, what's the trend of the future? How do you know? I can remember when, if you started out, like when Bill Wilson and I did, you had to have adjustable sights on your pistol, because that was important to being a good shooter. That's what everybody had, right? That's what all the cool kids had, was adjustable sights. Well, we kind of learned really they weren't important, and after about a decade or so, adjustable sights kind of fell off the map. I can remember when, hey, Pachmeyer grips, rubber grips came out, and man, you bought a pistol or a revolver, either one, first thing you did is bought a pair of Pachmeyer rubber grips and put on a gun, because you had to have those to be able to grip and control the gun. That was, nobody questioned it. You got to have those Pachmeyer grips. Well, after a decade or so, those things kind of slipped off the map. You guys all remember when there was a period where you had to have a laser on your gun. Crimson Trace grips, some of the other, everybody wanted a laser. Laser is the future. This is what works. This is what you got to have on your self-defense gun. See many lasers anymore? And the final one I want you to think about, for those of you that are naysayers and think this old man doesn't know what he's talking about. In 1990, an engineer at Smith & Wesson designed a new cartridge called the 40 Smith & Wesson. In 1995, the FBI adopted the 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge as their official duty round. By 2005, well over 60% of the law enforcement agencies in America were carrying 40 caliber Smith & Wesson sidearms. Where's the 40 Smith & Wesson today? It was a trend that failed. For something to become a common practice, it has to have some durability over the period of time. For example, we remember between 1985 and 1995, the American law enforcement community converted from revolvers to auto pistols. We all understand they're never going to go back. It's now, auto pistols are standard practices. To say that something like one of these red dot sighted pistols, no matter how well you like them or don't like them, to say that this is the future, the truth of the matter is we don't know that yet.